What is up, YouTube? What is up, Rumble? Welcome back to the Ryan Matta Show. Thank you guys for joining us on this beautiful Tuesday evening. Today is April 9th. It is 9:02 p.m., and we are going to dive into all things politics, money, inflation, government corruption with our friends over at Geopolitical and Empire over on X. If they go by at geopolitical_EMP over on X. If you guys could swing over there, give them a follow. Go down to the description and give them a follow as well. And I won't over talk it. I'm horrible with names. You guys know me. Hrvoje, if I'm saying that right.
Yeah.
Welcome to the show, my friend. So tell us a little bit about yourself and we'll kind of dive into this interview.
Yeah, real quick. I'm born in Chicago, proud American. I'm ethnically Croatian, which that's what my name means, Croat, Hrvoje, Croatian. I've got a Croatian passport. Also grew up partially in Croatia. In 2018, I became a Mexican national as well. So I've got 3 passports, proud Mexican as well. So basically, I studied history and education in the US. And then around the 2000s, I learned all about the empire, false flag operations, 9/11, right? The Federal Reserve, all of that stuff that a lot of us are familiar with. And I said I wanted to permanently expatriate from the American empire. And my ticket out was Peace Corps Mongolia. So 2006, I went to go live in a yurt in the Gobi Desert. I spoke intermediate Mongolian. I came back briefly to the US and then studied international relations at the Geneva School of Diplomacy. Some of my professors included Saddam Hussein's defense lawyer, Curtis Dobler, Dutch American, people of that stature. And then when I got my graduate degree, I said the world is my oyster. I was going to apply for jobs in Alaska, Afghanistan, Saudi Arabia, Mongolia, and I got hired to teach in Mexico. And, 1 year becomes 2, becomes 10. And I just ended up here in Mexico, low cost of living, sunny every day, tacos, married a Mexican. And so I taught at the top school here in Mexico. And 2012, I started sort of YouTubing and podcasting because I just wanted to talk to smart people to figure out what's going on. And so my first channel was Dissident Thinker. And then 2015, I started my podcast, Geopolitics and Empire, just moonlighting. And then that's kind of what I'm focusing at right now at the moment.
Wow, I'm so mind blown right now. Walk me through that from the beginning. So when was it that you decided that something wasn't right and you wanted to look into other things and kind of start that next chapter?
Well, I've sort of got like you mean with the rabbit hole stuff, or coming from I'm a Christian, so coming from like a Christian biblical worldview, you're by default skeptical about government, because man is evil by nature, thus government is evil by nature, bad, and so you talk about prophecy and this trend towards world government, totalitarian world government, and this sort of stuff. And so I've always had that. But then, Loose Change. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Loose Change, 2003 documentary about 9/11 being an inside job. And the last 2 years, I was doing a daily live show on TNT Radio. And the guy that just replaced me was Jason Burmis, who worked with InfoWars and who made Loose Change that changed my life 20 years ago. And so basically learning about the false flag operations, reading Creature from Jekyll Island by G. Edward Griffin. Fun fact,
right now.
2011. So while I was a grad student, I assisted G. Edward Griffin on his website as a volunteer. And I happened to be going out to California in 2011 to see one of my favorite bands, Soundgarden, which had reunited. And I wanted to just have a coffee with his assistant. G. Edward Griffin took me out to lunch in 2011, which was, amazing. And then just to add on as well, from 2017, I got hired to teach in Kazakhstan, out there between Russia and China. And I also got to shake hands with Mikhail Gorbachev in 2017. I went to Russia for 3 weeks with a group of Americans, part of a peace diplomacy, sort of citizens diplomacy mission. And we hung out for a couple hours with Gorbachev and stuff like that. So I've met a lot of interesting people. I met Ron Paul last year, and he's been on my podcast. So, yeah.
Wow, what a journey. And you said you were over in Mongolia?
Yeah.
Tell me about that.
Amazing place. It's got the lowest population density on the planet. I just love being in the middle of nowhere, in pure nature, with the nomads, half the population live in yurts. I think there's 3 to 4 million Mongolians. Half of them live in yurts. The other half live in Ulaanbaatar, the capital, in apartment complexes. And so it's a wonderful place if you can make it out there.
What's it like there? What are the food? Tell me a little bit about the political landscape over there.
Harsh conditions. The steppe, minus 30, minus 40 degrees. Absolutely. You get used to it. I love that they eat a lot of meat, dairy, because of the harsh conditions. We ate a lot of camel, horse, beef, lamb, that sort of stuff. The people are very, friendly, very tough, a lot of grit, and that sort of stuff.
Yeah, you go outside and you slip or hurt yourself or knock yourself out, you're done, right? Like that's so cold that you.
Yeah, you have to be careful, but they call it a Soviet hangover. They have problems still with vodka, alcoholism, and Mongolians. Some of them probably happens every year where they drink too much in the winter. They'll pass out. They'll black out outside and literally freeze to death. And so, I remember using, and we all had outhouses because you're living in a yurts. And it's winter time, and if it's the middle of the night and you got to go to the restroom, you just walk out in like minus 30. You get used to it,
Ooh. How far are the outhouses from the house?
No, nearby, but even still, the year overnight, when you have the fire in your yurts, it's warm, it's hot, it's toasty, but overnight it will die out, and in the morning, I'm in my bed with my blankets, and you can see your breath. And you have to work up the will to jump out of bed, start the fire, get back into bed, and wait for 5 minutes until the yurt warms up.
Well, I think I was spoiled. I went and got a heated toilet seat when I built this new place, and I was like, man, once you treat your ass to a heated toilet seat, you never go back. I could only imagine what the toilet seats were like out there at 40 below. Does your ass stick to the toilet seat?
It depends. I mean, things have slowly changed. I know just as I was leaving, my neighbor out there in the Gobi Desert was building himself a house, like a proper brick house. And some people had refrigerators in their yurts and stuff like that. So times are changing,
Whoa, that's pretty crazy. So they didn't have, a lot of the homes there didn't have refrigerators. Why? Because it's so cold outside, you just put everything outside, or?
Yeah, I mean, it's part of that. They've lived that style for 1,000 years, Genghis Khan and all that. But the yurts are connected to electricity. They got light bulbs and lights, and now fridges and whatever else they got cars, they got cell phones, that sort of stuff. Globalization.
So then, tell me about where you went after that. So was that right after you graduated?
Yeah, and I went to Mongolia, and then I did grad school in Switzerland, Geneva, studying international. I mean, fascinating place, being sort of in the belly of the beast, being a staff assistant, walking the halls of the original League of Nations, now the United Nations, Geneva, but then learning about the whole New World Order stuff, and then I just once I saw that, I said, I don't have the stomach to work for any corrupt, deep state government or globalist international governmental organization like the United Abominations, as I like to call it. And I said I wanted to work in a field where I could do so with integrity, that's why I went back to education, right? I can teach about these things in a truthful way and not have to, make compromises, which, maybe if I'm working for some government, you have to play ball. Like to go work for this U.S. State Department, you have to do what they tell you to do. I wouldn't even be able to work for the State Department because they do a profile like someone like me. They say, sorry, you ain't
gonna play ball.
No,
you're not controllable to an extent that they need to control you to make sure that you're going to do their bidding. That's crazy. So then you went down. So after that, you came back. Then you went to Mexico.
Yeah, and I was in Mexico. So I taught at the Tec de Monterrey, which is like the #1 private school where all the Mexican millionaires send their kids. They got 30 campuses. It's a high school and university in one. And it's affiliated with the World Economic Forum. It's the only university in all of Latin America that actually goes to Davos. They have like a connection. And Al Gore visited the campus when I was teaching there. They paid him $200,000 to talk about the lie of climate change. And then during the pandemic, I wasn't there, but I heard that they had the online graduation ceremony, and Bill Gates spoke at one of them, and then another year Hillary Clinton. So that tells you how globalist the institution was. They gave me mostly free reign, but there was like 1 or 2 semesters where they took away my courses at the university because I was being too politically incorrect.
Jeez, oh Pete, that's wild. That's absolutely blows my mind how the tentacles of the World Economic Forum are everywhere, especially in it seems like the more so the private schools and like where the elites are going and the children that might actually end up making it into government one day, or, you know, having a chance at getting into the political landscape. They want to make sure that they got their tentacles in them. They know who you are, what you've done, where you come from. It's bizarre. So tell me what's it like.
It's the same. It's the same thing everywhere. So I taught at the top private high school in Kazakhstan, the Nazarbayev Intellectual School, financed by Nursultan Nazarbayev, who was president for 30 years. They have 20 of those schools around Kazakhstan, and one university, trilingual, speaking English, Russian, and Kazakh. And they had model United Nations. The 17 Sustainable Development Goals were infused into every subject matter. So from Kazakhstan to Mexico to Europe to USA, everyone's being indoctrinated.
So where did that leave you? So you still teach there now. How does that sit with you? What do you teach there?
No. So I left. I finished Kazakhstan 2021, and I was just here in Mexico. And then I got hired to do TNT Radio from 2022 to 2024.
Okay.
And I just left TNT now to focus full time on my podcast, and so that's what I'm doing at the moment. Yeah.
And how's the internet down there? It seems like you're coming in great. Your videos quality is great.
Excellent.
Your audio's great.
In some cases, America is more third world sometimes than Mexico. My internet is super fast, and 5 minutes down the street from where I live, there are like millionaire Mexicans living. You know, I'm middle class, but you know, people have sometimes misconceptions of Mexico. It almost feels like America. You know, we've got Costco's and Amazon delivered, Sam's Clubs, all the same stuff that you like. A lot of the same stuff you have amenities in the U.S. You can barely even tell the difference.
You know, there's some reporters that have been down to certain spots in Mexico where they're building walls in Mexico or right along our border, and that people go, I thought the wall was being defunded, and the video's like, oh no, Mexico's paying for this part of the wall. Like they're like, it almost seems like they're thinking about not letting people back into Mexico or something. Do you see that being a reality?
Ron Paul used to joke about the wall being to keep Americans from getting out. And I did a fascinating interview with a guy called Todd Miller. It's in my archive. And he calls it the border security complex. And this is key when we talk about the police state, world government, the technocracy. And he's a leftist. And he says that the whole border security complex is bipartisan. Forget about Trump. It's Biden regime is investing in it, in these smart borders now with AI and AI outposts and drones. And what he said is that the US government has outposts all over the world with foreign governments, assisting them to set up the same type of technocratic border systems. So you're seeing now next year, the EU is activating something called ETIAS. So if you're not a European, to go to the EU from now on, you have to pay 10 euros and fill out this online form and wait to be approved. And that's like social credit system type stuff. So they're going to like see who you are. And if there are any red flags, they can just deny you entry into Europe. And so what Todd Miller said, that it's a scaffold. He's been going to all these expos, and he says, if you take a step back, it's a scaffolding. So they're building literally this prison planet. So every country is going to have this checkpoint system, and they're going to control the citizens exiting the country or entering other countries. So it's completely it's completely insane.
How did you go about getting your citizenship in Mexico?
Right. So I was born in the U.S., so I'm going to automatically get my U.S. passports.
Mm-hmm.
By birth, my parents are immigrants from Yugoslavia, Croatia, so I de facto have Croatian citizenship. And basically in Mexico, if you live for about 5 years in Mexico, you get citizenship, or 2 years after you're married to a Mexican. That's pretty. I got it like that.
So if you marry a Mexican, you can get citizenship there. Do you have to live there to get the citizenship there, or just married to one?
I'm not sure, but basically being married for 2 years to a Mexican, or 5 years, or having your permanent residency. I think often you don't even have to live here. You just have to kind of come back like once a year or something. It's not that difficult. During COVID, so many people flooded into Mexico. It's unbelievable. Canadians, Americans, Europeans, people from all around the world. And it's people. I've interviewed the international man, Doug Casey. It's a really good principle, international diversification, and many people, you can relatively easily get a temporary Mexican visa, which is then just automatically renewed for 4 years. Mm-hmm. And then you segue into the permanent residency. And then after that, you get citizenship, and you don't have to be here the whole time either. So again, something for people to think about.
Yeah, absolutely, man. That's very, very interesting. So walk me through what you're seeing right now with the political landscape.
We're screwed pretty much.
I agree.
I've interviewed 400 plus people, wealthy people like, Jim Rogers, Peter Schiff, Mark Faber, who's out in Thailand, diplomats, spies. I feel like it's the 100-year storm. It's like the 1930s. We are in a 1930s moment where the economy is collapsing. And basically, it's a train that's got built up momentum, and you can't stop it. You've got to see it through. So the economy is collapsing. Nations are preparing for war. It's that cycle. There's many people, the Kondratiev wave, Elliott wave cycle, Neil Howe's fourth turning. They're all variations of the same idea, these cycles of history. And so I think that's where we're at right now. The economy is collapsing. Hence, nations are preparing for war. We're switching. Bretton Woods is dying. The culture is degenerating. 20 years ago, I had this in my mind in America. Like 20 years ago in America, I said I studied history. I taught history. You could see that the economy was declining in Pax Americana. The culture would degenerate, like in Rome. Look what we have in America now. The whole gender stuff, the woke stuff, all this absolute insanity, cultural degeneration, and tyranny, the rising authoritarianism. I had in 2022 of April, when the Department of Homeland Security rolled out the Disinformation Governance Board, I got banned from PayPal. 4 months before that, I rebuilt my website, built a membership option integrating PayPal and Stripe, and the DHS singled me out with a few others and told PayPal to ban us. That is not American democracy or freedom or liberty. And then Matt Taibbi and Kim Iverson reported on my being deplatformed from PayPal, and so you're getting people now getting debanked, entrapped. There's a clip, I think you shared it as well, that just dropped before we started this call. An insane clip of a FBI, CIA officer admitting that they are entrapping innocent Americans, setting them up. This is like Nazi Germany, Soviet Union type stuff that's going on.
I reported on that in LFA today too, 100%. Scary shit, man. So how does this? So keep going. Sorry, I didn't mean to stop. I didn't mean to jump in there.
It's gotten to the point where every time I go to the U.S., I wipe my cell phone and laptop and fears it might be confiscated, and it's just like unbelievable that we've gotten to this point. And I feel like we're entering this sort of. I interviewed Jewish historian, renowned historian Edwin Black in 2020, one of my favorite interviews, and he calls it the algorithm ghetto. This sort of dystopian Total Recall, Minority Report type system where if you've got he calls it the algorithm ghetto because he compares it to the physical Jewish ghettos. So what they did to the Jews in Germany, walling them off in physical ghettos, they're doing to us now digitally. So they're building this digital algorithm system. They want to put us on to that. And then if you commit a thought crime, they just shut you off, where you literally won't be able to buy food. No one will help you because if they do, they're going to be shut off. You won't be able to drive your car to work, to get on an airplane, to do anything if they can succeed in building this sort of system out. That's the thing I freak out most about, because you see every country now, you've got websites like biometricupdate.com, which is reporting on this daily, and every day you see African countries, Asian countries, Latin America, Europe, governments are bringing in digital ID now. And that digital ID is going to be linked to all of your public and private services, things that you need to do. And so once they force everyone to have a digital ID, we're screwed. And then that means you won't be able to do anything without permission. It's going to be a papers, please society. And then that links to CBDC and all that other stuff. And that stuff's happening here in Mexico. People have this image that Mexico is this like, land of the free. No, I literally live in a smart city. People don't know. I live in the second biggest city in Mexico, Guadalajara. It's officially called a resilient city. And I've looked at the local white papers. Resilient cities is a synonym for smart city. And in the white papers here, official government documents, it says this Mexican smart resilient city is financed by the Rockefeller Foundation. And it talks about cashless society. They're building out massive public transport and slowly trying to get people to stop using their cars. And so it's happening in Mexico. It's happening everywhere.
So, I mean, I agree. I agree with you. And that's scary shit. So what is your solution? Are you a Bitcoiner?
I'm not big on crypto. I've got some people, I get a small donations sometimes from crypto. It's perhaps one solution, but I've got a crazy, conspiracy theory that I might change my mind in the future. I've interviewed Bitcoiners like Mark Yeftovich up in Canada, Guy Swan, and others. I think Greg Foss is his name, the other Canadian.
Greg Foss. I love Greg Foss. Huge fan of him.
Yeah, I had him on my TNT show. And look, I don't know. So I talked to everyone from all the left, right spectrum. I don't care. But I'm just kind of skeptical with Bitcoin. I kind of have this feeling that I call it a globalist Trojan horse, sort of to whet our appetites. Because, you think, who created the internet? DARPA. Who created GPS? DARPA. Who created Facebook? DARPA. Twitter was basically Twitter. Twitter was merged with the military industrial complex. Amazon and Microsoft have huge contracts with the Pentagon, CIA, cloud computing. And so I just feel like Bitcoin, and then, you had stuff like the 1990s MIT electronic currency white paper, the Economist 1988 cover talking about they had this symbolism of a phoenix rising out of the ashes with a Bitcoin-like coin, and predicting 2018 was the year the fiat currencies would sort of vanish and we'd move into this new system. So I just kind of feel like it was part of their plan. And even if it wasn't, I think you can see now they're trying to co-opt it. James O'Keefe dropped a video recently talking about Ethereum and how the government was coming in and attempting to hijack Ethereum, right? Monopolize the crypto space. So there's this battle going on right now.
What's your thoughts on Bitcoin being open source and no government controls it? Nobody can stop it. Nobody can change it. Nobody can co-opt it. It's incorruptible. For the first time in human existence, mankind has created something that is incorruptible. They could try to build systems around it like they did with gold, but that really doesn't work either, because with gold, you're always wondering like, oh, how much did the miners mine out of the ground over the last couple of weeks? You don't know how much is in somebody's safe. You don't know what's been lost, what's been found. There's meteorites or anything like that. So it's easy for them to manipulate the price of gold, where Bitcoin, there's a finite number of them. When you self-custody them, I mean, everything's on a blockchain. It self-audits itself every 10 minutes.
Yeah, I'm not an expert in that field, like I said. But again, if you talk about gold, all the Austrian school talks about sound money, all that stuff, and gold being sort of another example of that. But they delinked the dollar in 71 from gold. Like they can do this sort of stuff even with Bitcoin. What if BlackRock, Vanguard come in? They manipulate with the ETF purchases, or they shut down the on ramps with the exchanges, playing all these different games. So again, I'm not an expert per se in the crypto space, but I felt like it was them whetting our appetites. A lot of people getting rich with cryptos, and that sort of being a segue into CBDCs. So yeah, I don't know. I don't have the answer to that.
So what about Nostra, the new social media platforms, which I got a node on its way here now. So instead of having a Twitter page where your social media network runs on somebody else's server and somebody else's platform and they have the ability to debank you, what if you had control of your own social media page? And then you connected with everybody else who had their own social media page, and everybody stood up their own nodes. And we started to build this complete decentralized infrastructure around social media where nobody could deplatform you, which is what's happening. I mean, I got my node on the way over here. I got another one sitting here. But basically, my node will have the power to store and run 50,000 different people's social media platforms. So I can find a fellow like you and like, hey, man, will you run a backup copy of mine? I'll run a backup copy of yours. And you're like, yeah, sure. Other people, like say Redacted has a huge page. He's like, oh, hey, Ryan, I'll give you $1 a month to, in Bitcoin to run my node and run a backup copy. You're like, all right, cool. Yeah, got it. And then all of a sudden, before you know it, there's a copy of everybody's server stored anywhere. So as long as one node is online, you can always access that, right? And it becomes basically like Napster or Morpheus, where they couldn't really take it down. They couldn't really shut it down because all that had to be standing up was one copy of that software, one piece somewhere on one computer. And then as soon as that one piece came online, everybody had access to it. What's your thoughts on us going in that route? I know you've been deplatformed. You're seeing what's going on. I mean, to not spend $300 on a node and have your own freedom and the ability to back something up where nobody can take it down. What's your thoughts on that?
I mean, we should for sure definitely move in that direction and try that. I've interviewed on my TNT show maybe 2 years ago, Jeremy Kaufman, who was the CEO of Odyssey Library, right? And they lost their battle, the SEC, and he left the company. They had to shut down, I think, LBRY. Odyssey is still operating. I'm not sure how that's functioning. And they operate on the system similar to what you're talking about. I post all my podcasts there as well. And there's a lot of these things like Bastion, right? I still post. I even interviewed the CEOs of Float. They failed. It seems like Float, a couple months back, they shut down. They didn't gain enough traction. And I still post to Tim Berners-Lee's. He's one of the guys who supposedly invented the internet. MeWe, you've got Gab, Minds, Getter. And I think the problem with some of these platforms is they don't get enough traction. Most people are on the what do you call it, the public plazas like Twitter and YouTube and Rumble is got a pretty good audience, is growing, and places like that. BitChute is not bad either. So we should be definitely doing what you said. But the system is also looking to up their game. The last lines of defense are like your own website and the podcast ecosystem. For the first time, a couple months back, I've been using since 2015 Germany-based SoundCloud as my podcast audio host. They deleted an episode for the first time ever a couple months back, and it was an episode 1 year old with a biotech consultant. And it's crazy now. The thing they're most obsessed about is with big pharma, COVID. You can't deviate from the narrative when it comes to the medical industrial complex. And so now they're coming after podcast hosts, and I worry about the web hosts as well. I switched to my hosting on Epic, EPIK, and I went to Epic, and I paid more to host my website on Epic because the founder said he was Christian and liberty-minded, and they were hosting Gab and InfoWars and all of the dissidents. They got taken over. Last year, they said, we're not hosting anymore, Gab, InfoWars, and like we could, this crazy stuff is going on where they're taking over companies that were freedom-minded and now switching them in the other direction. You've got ICANN, and so I worry about, even if we're successful with what you're talking about, at the UN ICANN level, what are some of the things that they'll be able to do? But we should keep doing what we're doing, like you say.
Yeah, I mean, well, once I'm running my own node, and you should be standing your service up on Flux, which is a decentralized-ish blockchain, right? And that nobody has control over, right? You're renting server space from miners, and you're Dockerizing your application. You stand it up on their backend. There's no CEO to take down. There's nobody to take down as long as that blockchain continues to run. Your server is going to be backed up there, and it's stored in multiple locations. So you're not just on one server, you're on 3 or 4 servers, and they're redundant servers. So that means in the coding language is recursive, it's Solidity. So anytime that a node gets taken offline, it instantly spins up another node and deploys on a different node, right? And it's redundant, so you're already up on 3. So as soon as one goes down, you're still up on 2 while it spins up the third one. And then it's just like whack-a-mole. They've showed some scenarios where attackers are trying to take out like the Cadena blockchain, and they were literally taking down one node, and then they was spinning up another one. It was like you could just see this attacker just going after one node after another, and every time he'd get 1 or 2 down, another one was spinning up, and he'd get 2 more down, and then another one, and then another one, and then he'd get 2 more down, and it was just like this game of whack-a-mole. It was really interesting watching that play out. Nobody could take down the server. So I do think that there's technology.
The question of our internet access. So now they're pushing all across the board age verification, which is a Trojan horse for, again, digital ID and CBDC. And so what if they say you can't access, your ISP's internet without your digital ID? And again, if you're a thought criminal, they could deny you. I've got a Starlink as well. That's my plan B internet. And what happens again if Starlink, if the DoD that gives all the contracts to Elon Musk's overrules Musk somehow? And again, there are all these different points of failure. We got to keep doing what we're doing. That's freedom. People love freedom and hate tyranny. And we've made it this far, beating back evil in history. So what? I mean, what is your it sounds like that there's there's nothing that man has created or will create. I mean, if you don't believe in Bitcoin, then there is absolutely no hope for the future. We're just going to end up in 15-minute cities, and there's no tool powerful enough to stop these people. I don't know if I'd frame it that way. I mean, again, for me, my white pill is Jesus, because I think we're fighting these forces of darkness and evil. And I never think there's any one tool. Bitcoin can be a great tool, but I don't, and I think it's never good. If you're fighting a guerrilla war, it's decentralized. You should use as many tools at your disposal and not just stick with one. Like in the video game Doom, right? The BFG, the big effing gun, right? Because the system can go after it. So I think the mentality should be decentralized guerrilla warfare, spread out. I heard you on the last chat you did with my past guest, Chris Reddy husband. You got Monero, all sorts of other stuff. And all hope is not lost. We just got to keep doing what we're doing. And it's just a matter of time. Death by 1,000 cuts. When we talk about stabbing, to quote, Hotel California, stabbing the beast with our steely knives. It's death by 1,000 cuts. And in some regimes lasted a couple of years, others lasted decades. So we don't know how it's going to play out. We are in Lord of the Rings, basically.
Yeah, they're just taking our freedom away at such a fast pace right now that, everything revolves around their control of money. I mean, it has. Once the IMF started to, control global currencies and, dictate the exchange rates of currencies all across the world, they've taken full control. And the things that they've done in these other countries, in like Haiti and where was that other one that they did? Just atrocities, just funding straight genocide. Like, these are the most evil fucking people in the world. And every day we wake up and use their fucking currency, which gives them full totalitarian control to extract the wealth of our nation. And there's no, you can't go to gold. Gold's not going to give you an option, but Bitcoin does. It gives you that tool. It's a union of the middle class is the best way to look at it. Unless there's a better option, just sitting here and continuing to use their currency and thinking we're going to get a stronghold. When look what they've done to America in 4 years. It is absolutely went from, at one point it felt like the greatest country in the world under Trump. And then now it's like, and I didn't even think that at the time. I was just happy that I had a business and I felt free and I felt like I could go out and work hard and make something of my life and, work a full-time job, go to school full-time, be a dad, and run a side hustle, which turned into my full-time business, which was thriving. And I built it all by myself with nobody else and just from the ground up. And before I knew it, I'm doing $125,000 a month in sales on Amazon, and then just like that, gone, everything. Overnight, went from $125,000 a month to negative $5,000 a month in sales in 1 month. And that's when I realized, I was like, fuck, I overplayed my hand. I never thought like that our government would instantly rip and destroy our entire fucking country overnight, and then it did. And then now here we are, and it's like, shit, man, we're playing their game, and everything you do from within inside the system strengthens the system. Doesn't matter if you shout at it or you throw rocks or you shoot guns or you start revolutions. It doesn't fucking matter. You're operating inside their system. So until you withdraw from that system, when their game's so rigged, there's no option but to not play, right? When you're going to lose. So I find it hard that like more people aren't waking up going, fuck, we've tried everything else, right? We tried to be anti-Bitcoin. We were skeptical about it. You know, it's an open source code that anybody can audit in real time. I mean, in every single university and the smartest minds from all across the world have, you know, studied this thing and they've tried to hack it and they tried to break it and they try to find loopholes or exploit it. And it's never happened. The most powerful government in the world, the United States government with the full backing of the CIA, tried to co-opt it and destroy it. That was Sam Bankman-Fried. And they failed. Bitcoin went down to 15,000. People, you know, got wrecked for a minute, but look at it's already up at a new all-time high now. And anybody that held on and continued to buy is extremely in a much better position. So the government's stealing 10% of your wealth every year. How do you ever get ahead? You're never going to make more money than you did. No business is giving you a 10% raise every year. So where does that sit with you? Like, how do you get out? How do we dig our way out of this? How does the average American who can barely keep their head above water, who's getting taxed 50%, survive for another 2 years of this?
Yeah, I'm meeting Mexicans. So I'm an American Mexican, but I'm meeting Mexicans now that are leaving the U.S. saying it's too expensive. Like it doesn't make economic sense anymore, which is like unprecedented. And it's, you know, the Great Reset project. It's at its core, it's a neo-feudal project. It's neo-feudalism. They want to erase the middle class and only have two classes, the aristocracy and us serfs and plebes. And it's across the globe. Like you mentioned, all asset prices are inflating. I talk to people, you know, young professionals in the US, in Mexico, in Croatia, my other country in Europe. They're working full-time jobs. They're doing everything that they can. They can't afford to buy a house. Like you said, their wages, you know, they get a raise every year, 1%, 2, 3, 4. Meanwhile, housing prices go up 10, 20%. The price of food, energy, clothing, everything is just skyrocketing. And I think that's by design, because there was an article last year, I think, here in Mexico talking about even the real estate market in Mexico's being influenced by the BlackRocks and the Vanguards who are purchasing up these properties. And so it's the neo-feudal project. And then you mentioned IMF, you know, one of their goals is to bring about this one world currency with, you know, one of their ideas is the special drawing right. And so they're trying to push us towards that. But a lot of the guests that I've talked to a lot of, you know, a Canadian survivalist not long ago, Stefan Verstappen, Curtis Stone, the urban farmer in Canada. And I'm getting a lot of the same answers, which are, as you say, parallel structures, parallel systems, parallel economies. Just unplug and get out the way. There's nothing you can do. Protesting isn't going to make a difference. Just get out the way, get some land, food, water, crypto, whatever, gold, silver, like real physical assets, form a network, which is one of the most important, like a local, physical, social network. And that's kind of to what can you do? If you're in the US, you know, you don't necessarily have to leave your country and go to Mexico or Latin America or whatever. I've had Canadians ask me, should I move to Russia? And I'm like, not necessarily. It's not always the best option to flee. Maybe if you're living in an expensive part of the U.S., find a much cheaper part of the U.S. and get frugal. Right? Move to. I'm from Illinois. I don't think I'd ever move back to Illinois. I've interviewed James Wesley Rawls of Survival Blog. He talks about the American redoubts, like the Floridas, the Texas, the Dakotas, Wyomings, Montanas, places like that. And so I would just get your expenses down, move to cheaper locales, find like-minded people. But, you know, as you say, start getting some crypto, gold, silver. And, you know, if you can't afford a lot, you start with a couple ounces, a fraction of a Bitcoin or whatever. I think land is important. And network, I think very important is having a network of people.
So where do you think this plays out in 2024? What do you think going into the election season? What do you see happening in America?
I don't know, man. I ask my guests every day this, but you got the Civil War movie coming out, a lot of predictive programming. There's a 1997 film called The Second Civil War, which I recently watched. And the plot there is that migrants are coming into the U.S. and Washington is sending Pakistani migrants into Idaho and Idaho is not going to accept them. And you've got the Idaho National Guard. Basically, civil war breaks out with the U.S. federal government sending troops against the Idaho National Guard, which is very similar to the situation we've got with the Texas National Guard and the federal. Yeah, I interviewed ex-CIA guy, J. Michael Waller, on my podcast, and he said he's ex-CIA. It was the craziest thing. He wrote the book Big Intel: How the Deep State Became Villains. He was CIA, and he said this could be a potential scenario for civil war. And this is the first time this ever happened to me. I tried to leave a review for his book on Amazon, and Amazon sent me an email. They rejected it. They said that my review of his book was hate speech or something like that. And then I submitted a second time. Amazon allowed me, but then they sent me a warning. They said, if you do this again, we might ban you from the Amazon community or Amazon. Like, I've never had a book review on Amazon censored, and we're getting to that level. I think because his book, Big Intel, because he's someone from within the deep state who's calling it out now, we can't have that, right? And so I've interviewed Colonel Douglas McGregor, who said we might not even have elections. But I think whatever happens, it's going to be something probably unprecedented, something that we haven't seen up until now. Like nothing good. I think what we're going to go through might not be as bad as some people project, but I think it's definitely going to be worse than last time. And again, it's that confluence of this 100-year storm, this fourth turning. We're on the cusp of world war, civil war, and you see many countries now. I interviewed William I. Robinson on my podcast. He talks about global civil war because the system is breaking down. Governments are collapsing. Look at Mexico, failed state, Ecuador, Sri Lanka, Germany now is being deindustrialized, Europe, countries are collapsing. So it's a mix of civil wars and, this world war. And it's just, I feel like things are just going to start popping off. Look at the flashpoints: Venezuela, Guyana, Azerbaijan, Armenia, Ukraine, Gaza, the Indo-Pacific, the U.S.-Mexico border, right? And so it's that wave again. It's 1930s all over again.
And it's a dystopian nightmare. It really is. It's fucking mind-boggling that one man, President Trump, kept all this fucking shit together. One fucking man. Nobody fucking saw it at the time. It was the most peace by strength. He led this entire fucking nation. The Abraham Accords, peace in the Middle East for the first fucking time. Love him or hate him, but the fucking world was such a better place. And now we live in this dystopian nightmare controlled by a bunch of unelected government bureaucrat hacks who are doing nothing but trying to fucking kill us. And we're sitting here like frogs in a boiling pot, just waiting for our to hit that boiling point. And by that time, we're fucking dead. And it blows my mind that people aren't like, yeah, here, Bitcoin, dude, it's a fucking great solution. What else do you have to lose at this point? Legit. Like 2 more years, we're in a fucking civil war. Or we can try to go, hey, let's debank these motherfuckers. Look at how hard our life got when we get debanked. What if we fucking debank them? What if we Bud Light their ass and just all switch to Bitcoin overnight? What's the worst that's going to happen? Like literally, how much worse can this get? Do you think?
I don't know if have you spoken to Aaron Day? He's really good. I had him on my TNT show, and he's really well versed. He wrote a good book on all this stuff, Bitcoin and CBDCs, and he says the same thing that you're saying, that we need to get our money out of the banks, basically debank the system, get our money out, put it into Bitcoin, gold, whatever, just pull out of the system. So, he talks about that. And one of my recurring podcast guests, Vietnam veteran Bob Moriarty, shout out to him if he's listening. He flew 800 sorties in Vietnam. He's also a supporter of mine and a guest. And he said on our last chat, he lives out in France, he said, we're going to make it. We always do, and this is a guy that flew under the Eiffel Tower in 800 sorties in Vietnam. And I think he's crossed the Atlantic. And he said, we're going to make it. We always do, regardless of how bad things get. And he also said about this year, the black swans, he says, there's going to be so many black swans that it's going to look like midnight at midday, which it did on Monday, right? With the eclipse, yeah. But you get the idea there. So I think I sort of look forward to the challenge. I talked in 2021, Italian, he's kind of famous, Italian film producer, architect Robin Manotti, and he was bringing up during COVID fascism. Umberto Eco, the Italian philosopher, who calls it eternal fascism. Every generation has to deal with this totalitarianism. And I just thought about this, the stories, me being Croatian, my great-grandfather died as a result of World War I. My grandfather was a prisoner for 6 months in the hole in the ground of the Croatian Nazi regime. My uncle, who's still alive, he fought in the dissolution of Yugoslavia, and look where we are now, So if you think about it, every generation must deal with this tyranny. It's just a fact of life. War is the default setting. Peace is the anomaly. That's what Australian Special Forces Ricardo Bossi of Australia One Party told me in 2020 on my podcast. So it's interesting times,
Right, but all of it revolves around their ability to print money. If they couldn't print money out of thin air, no war would ever get started, because how would you raise the funds for it? You'd have to tax your citizens, and it would cause a revolution before the war even got started. Like, think about just what happened in Ukraine. If Joe Biden came out and said, hey, we need $250 billion because Russia killed the entire Ukrainian army within seconds, right? So now most of the people that are fighting over there aren't even Ukrainian. They're literally, they're what do they call them? Missionaries. Right, not missionaries.
Mercenaries.
Mercenaries.
Latest report yesterday was that you've even got now Colombian and Mexican cartel members working as mercenaries in Ukraine.
Right, like that's how crazy this shit is. Like our $250 billion went and built a second army over there of just basically mercenaries that are willing to go over there for large sums of money and go fight on the front line. And Russia's just picking them off one by one. So, like that wave is gone. There's no more missionaries, according to McGregor. Right, like he's the one who says that, like, that's how we built that second army, and it's gone. And now they're taking like mentally disabled and women and children and just throwing them into the slaughterhouse to keep this Ponzi scheme going. But if Joe Biden would have came out and said, hey, guess what? That paycheck you're getting next week, the $5,000 you think is coming in, we're going to take $5,000 from every American. That's just going to be the start. And then we're going to have to increase your taxes by 20%. So you're going to give us an extra 20% out of your paycheck every single month. It would have been a revolution in the streets before night. He would have been drug out of office instantly. And I think that until enough Americans wake up and go, okay, my perception of Bitcoin, of questioning it, I don't have an option anymore. I have no choice but to choose to adopt this standard, because if I don't, I'm dead. My family's dead. We're going to end up homeless on the streets that our founding fathers fought to conquer. We're going to be getting raped by migrants. We have no option at this point. And it just baffles my mind that more large names in this space aren't giving somebody a better option besides, hey, yeah, go to your local city council meeting and try to figure it out. Like, okay, like that's a great idea. Like, I like the inspiration, but 99% of people don't do that. People can't even afford to go to the grocery store because they can't afford to drive there and put gas in their car. Like, Americans are fucking broke right now, in the most debt that they've ever been in their entire life, and probably the worst position that they've ever been in their entire life. And they're doing the same thing that they did yesterday and the day before and the day before. So until we can break free of that slave mindset, I tell everybody, if you were born in like 1900 AD, right, during that 400-year period of slavery where the Jews were enslaved, and you were born at year 200, your parents were slaves, your grandparents were slaves, your great-great-grandparents were slaves, like you knew nothing about but being a slave. And like we were born in, when you're born in the 80s or 70s or 60s, I mean, your parents were born into fiat slavery, their parents were born into fiat slavery. And like before that, I mean, I even tried to think back like the lessons that my great-great-grandma taught me. I don't think yet like they really are instilled in this generation anymore, because you're not really telling family stories like you used to. It's like you're watching YouTube videos, and I don't have to remember something my mom told me if we recorded it at my birthday party, because it's on a movie. If I ever want to go watch it, it's on a CD or DVD, or it's on the internet now. And I feel like people don't store and they don't remember history the same. And it's kind of like we're making so many memories every day with TikTok. It's like this vicious cycle. I almost think that's like social media sometimes is designed to like suck that brain power from you and keep you into this screen, so you're not putting your head in a book, or you're not calling a friend or family member, or you're not, what are your thoughts on what social media does to our psychology?
No, it's total social engineering. And to your last point, I've always made it a point when I go back home to Croatia to interrogate my remaining family members, like my aunt. I'm like, tell me the story again in as many details as you can about what happened to my grandfather, being a prisoner, or this or that. Like, I want to know. I need to know. Whereas, as you say, people aren't doing that. as much because everything's online. But yeah, social media. I've interviewed Patrick Fagan, who's really good on this. It's just, it's dumbed us down. It's the technology. I interviewed Dr. Aaron Hrvoje, former famous ethics professor that got fired during COVID, and he said, they couldn't have done the pandemic without the iPhone and the smartphone that was came about in the late 2000s. That was key. And it's I used to be a teacher, and there was one great TED Talk which explained how the movies back in the day, the one scene, the frame, you'd have the same frame for a long time, right? Like 10 seconds, 15 seconds, you're looking at the same frame. And now it changes like every 2 seconds, right?
60 frames a second.
And it's the same thing with the kids. You're flipping, you're changing your own frame. You're looking at YouTube and then Facebook and Twitter, TikTok. Every 2 seconds, you're changing the frame. That's biologically, physiologically rewiring your brain so that you're training yourself not to have an attention span. And that's why the kids in the class. That's why I don't want to be a teacher anymore. I might go back someday to education, but it's and I ask people currently who are professors, and they say, yeah, it keeps getting worse. Kids don't pay attention. They don't read books. And so it's rewiring our brains. And then I interviewed a great academic who's in Poland, Gary Robson. It's in my archive, and he talks about how he calls it like a cybernetic loop. So basically, they're programming us through this black mirror. It's programming, right? Mentally, visually, and so forth. And so it's like a hypnosis, and they're programming people. That's why you see these liberal woke globalists today. They've been programmed through this stuff, and we haven't. And so we're in this battle to try to. It's like a Matrix style battle.
Man, your information is absolutely mind blowing. We got about 5 minutes left in the show. I want to make sure that you tell all us about your shows. You got a new podcast going on. I want everybody to swing over to Twitter and give you a follow at Geopolitical and Empire. Geopolitics and Empire, right? Am I saying that right? Yeah, Geopolitics.
Yeah, Geopolitics and Empire, yeah.
Yep. And then you also are doing your show. So tell us all about it.
Yeah, so geopoliticsandempire.com is the website. I started the Substack a couple months ago. That's my main sort of income right now, is people subscribing, becoming $5 a month, $50 a year, paid subscribers on geopoliticsandempire.substack.com. And I'm doing like a weekly Zoom call with members only. And I'll be doing my interviews are always free with my guests, but some paywalled articles that I'll write and stuff like that. And yeah, I very on my Twitter and then Telegram, we got like 13,000 on the Telegram, and on my Twitter, I'm very active, posting the daily news. And yeah, that's pretty much what I'm focusing on at the moment.
Man, you're a wealth of knowledge. So we got a couple more minutes. Tell me a little bit about money. Like, what are your thoughts on like what's happening with the expansion of the money supply? We're at $35 trillion in debt. It seems like we've kicked that can down the road every way humanly possible, that without the control of the media to manipulate the narrative and convince Americans why it's in their best interest for them to raise the debt ceiling and remove the debt ceiling cap and all these other things. Where does this leading to? Central bank digital currency?
Yeah, I'm slightly less well-versed in that stuff, but I'm hearing different theories, like people talk about dollar collapse. G. Edward Griffin, who took me out to lunch, Creature from Jekyll Island, and Peter Schiff have long talked about the hyperinflation of the dollar, de-dollarization. So the rest of the world would stop using dollars, and those dollars would come back to the U.S. and basically bring inflation back to the U.S. Hyperinflation. That's one scenario. Others are saying, I've talked to people who are very bullish on American empire, like Michael Beckley, and they say America will remain the superpower. I entertain that option as well. Some say that the Fed or the U.S. will make dollars scarce. So the reason BRICS and the other countries are switching to other currencies is because they know that they, in the future, will be denied access to dollars. So that's another, scenario. But regardless, I think to your earlier point, which I think was important, we need to just get out of the system as much as possible legally, so they can't tax us. If you don't have money in the bank, if you've put it in alternatives which they can't reach, if it's land or foreign housing or something. I've even considered giving up my U.S. citizenship, given that I've got 3 citizenships, and so I wouldn't have to file with the IRS any longer. And so I think that's another key as well, just legally trying to get out of their system so they can't, as you say, tax you to oblivion. But yeah, I could see the U.S. System collapsing. I've talked to Dmitry Orlov, who says the U.S. might experience its own Soviet-style collapse, and others say, maybe they'll back the dollar with a Bitcoin or something.
Yeah, I mean, it's possible. They say that if you can't control the world's currency, that you would inherently not want anybody to control the world's currency, which makes Bitcoin that only option. A lot of Bitcoiners are really, I think, like they were driving that narrative, like that the U.S. government's going to have no choice. They're going to do this. Bitcoin is going to be good for the U.S. dollar. And yeah, maybe it might be, but it's hard to convince people that, like, okay, this dollar is going to be backed by Bitcoin. So we want you to hold the dollar and don't use that Bitcoin. That's dangerous, but we're going to back it with it. It kind of takes that wind out of that sail. Maybe. I mean, there are so many sheep in this country. You could not wrap your head around it. Like just watching these people just like be led to the slaughter. And it's like, man, you're just going to keep walking. You're like on the edge of the cliff and all the sheep are piling up behind you. And you're just like, yeah, 1 inch closer. I can get only 2 foot away from that 50,000 foot drop. But yeah, one more step forward. I'm not off the edge yet, and it's like, okay, how do you convince an entire nation to wake up? Is it possible?
People say there's basically 3 categories: the people who have waken up, and then there's that 30% middle sort of who know something is wrong, but they're too cowardly to, step forward, and then this core group that will never change. And I kind of at this point feel like we got to leave those people for dead. That 20-30% that's got Stockholm syndrome. They will never be convinced. Leave them for dead. And, it's the founding fathers said it's this irate minority, this critical mass of people that change history. So you don't even need to convince everyone. You just have to get the critical mass to shift the tide.
Yeah, somebody was saying that about, like, somebody on my show, I think it said 5%. I think it was last night, Prepper Dad was talking about kosher salt. He's like, if you could just get 5% of people and the other 95 don't care whether it's kosher or non-kosher, but the 5% care, then inherently everybody uses kosher salt. And I was like, wow. And I realized that I don't think people really care what currency they use. As long as it stores their value and it doesn't deteriorate over time. I don't think you'd care if you paid with a Visa credit card or you paid with an American Express. I don't think you'd care if you saved in dollars or Bitcoin, as long as it could provide all the services that you need. Do you think that's true? Or what percentage of people do you think would need to wake up in this country for us to take this shit back?
I mean, as this general principle that's applied to different scenarios, I've heard anywhere, from 5 to 10 to 15%, 20%. I mean, that's how the founding of America happened. But I think also the money has to be relatively easy to use. If it's esoteric or obscure, it's going to be difficult to onboard people. So it has to have a certain amount of convenience as well when it comes to using it.
I agree. And I think that's what everybody's really working on. At least the bigger players in the game are really trying to streamline that process, because you're right. I mean, I could set up a business and get them accepting Bitcoin in a very short period of time, in less than a couple hours. And if they wanted to learn and they wanted to accept it, but for them to actually fully understand it and not just have somebody tell them what to do kind of thing. I mean, it's a good 120 hours, which is a lot of studying, especially in this time. But if you just put 2 hours into Bitcoin, and I got an amazing playlist by Robert Breedlove. And these are 2 people. I don't know if you ever had the opportunity to interview Michael Saylor or Robert Breedlove, but if you get the chance, these 2 gentlemen right here, I'll put the playlist here on the screen. It's, I guess they're the most critical minds. Like, I've never had anybody really watch this playlist all the way through, and it's my What is Bitcoin playlist. I'm going to throw it up here on the screen. Give me 1 second. I don't know why it didn't.
Have you interviewed Saylor?
I have not had the opportunity to interview Saylor. No, Breedlove. I was setting up an interview with Breedlove. He was going to be my guest when my channel hit 100,000. So I was kind of waiting for my channel over here to hit 100,000. And then in the process, my Twitter got hacked, and he was following my old Twitter, and now he's not following my new Twitter. So I haven't had the opportunity to make contact with him. But he did the Saylor series, episodes 1 through 5. by the time you get to episode 5, you become so bullish on Bitcoin. Like I tell you, if it's a husband and wife that sit home every night and they watch this, by episode 5, you're going to want to sell you're going to want to take your wife's wedding ring and your wedding ring, and you're going to want to go pawn them to go buy more Bitcoin. He's like, that's, he breaks it down in such a good way. And it's not really a what if anymore. Like the questions aren't really debatable anymore. I mean, we have BlackRock in these foreign nation states, like this Saudi prince and some of the most powerful people in the world, they're buying Bitcoin, right? That should tell you something. The days of like, it might be going to zero, gold just doesn't work. I went out and I was buying this house. And in the process, I was waiting for the economy to collapse. I remember 08, like it was yesterday. And I remember feeling like, gosh, damn it. Like my landlord in I think it was 2011, bought a 3-bedroom house in Howell, which is a really nice area. And at one point, that house was like $165,000, and he bought it for $30,000. And then him and his brother bought another one for $20,000. And I just remember thinking, okay, like I'm gonna go to work and I'm gonna save money, and I'm gonna save these dollars because the next crash, I'm gonna be that guy that's out buying all of this property, right? And in the process, I got to a point, like maybe this was like a year ago, where I was sitting on a big pile of cash going, fuck, dude, it's not going to collapse. They're going to, like the Fed has a trading desk on Wall Street now. They're just going to inject liquidity into the market because they're not going to let it collapse play out under Biden. After everything that man's done, if people watch their 401ks pretty much go 50% off, I mean, they would have been chanting to drag him out of office. So I bought all this gold and silver, and it was so inconvenient. It was such a pain in the ass. I'm never going to go into a store and be like, oh, that cup of coffee is $4.99 in silver. So let me get out my dropper to verify its authenticity. Let me shave some of this shavings off here. It's just not going to happen. It's not realistic, right? You need a form of currency. And then people are like, oh, we're going to go to a gold-backed currency. Bro, we tried the gold-backed currency. That's how we got into this shithole in the first place. We tried it. It failed. And not just us, right? Almost every nation in the world at one point had a gold-backed currency. I think Switzerland was the final one to like get off their gold standard because absolute power corrupts absolutely, and no government, no man, no human, no organization can handle that much. It's just too much. You control the entire world with your fingers. Jerome Powell is literally the most powerful man in the world. We've wrecked nations, we've destroyed governments, we've overthrown, we staged color revolutions, all because we have the ability to print their money. So going back to a new gold-backed currency, which is going to give them that same control, is just it's retarded. I mean, you have to be a fucking moron to think that that's the solution. When you have something for the first time that is incorruptible, no government can counterfeit, nobody can confiscate, nobody can manipulate. For the first time in human history, man has created something that is incompromisable, that is incorruptible. And until enough people realize that, it's just, I don't see us going to use this. And I tried, man. I was like, oh, yeah, I'm going to go. I got a big pile of Bitcoin. I'm going to start saving in gold and silver. And I did it one time, and I bought about $15,000 worth. And even though it's up right now, I'm like, I would trade you this in a heartbeat for more Bitcoin. Anybody wants my gold? I'm going to buy a new car. So this is probably going to get sold off to buy a new vehicle or more Bitcoin. I mean, I just can't. What are your thoughts on that?
I was in February. I was in Acapulco at Anarchapulco, Jeff Berwick's Anarchapulco, and I was getting coffee on the street somewhere. And one of the speakers was there at this coffee shop, and very hardcore, very cool guy, libertarian dude, full on Bitcoiner. And he made it a point to come to Mexico without like pesos, Mexican pesos, and just trying to use Bitcoin. And he had silver ounces, and he was looking for people to buy his silver, or he'd sell crypto to get pesos. Mm-hmm. And he was having trouble, and so that kind of proves what you're saying. It's not, he was kind of stuck without Mexican pesos, and he thought he could make it with just silver ounces or trying to barter crypto, which comes to that, what you're talking about earlier, just most people, a large amount of people just not knowing how to use crypto. And I thought I'd throw one more scenario out there. I listened to this interview with Danielle Cambone, formerly of Stansberry Research, now with ITM Trading. She did a great interview recently with this Swiss financial analyst. And he said what they might do is they might issue the CBDC and sort of create a bifurcated system where the current debt will remain in the old dollar. Meanwhile, they've started this new digital dollar, and it's sort of like wiping the ledger clean. So that old debt is stuck in the old currency. And we've started now with this sort of new currency. I thought that might be something that they, a trick that they might play, right?
Yeah, and I mean it's absolutely mind blowing. $217 trillion in unfunded liabilities. So where does that debt go? Where do we put the 217 trillion of unfunded liabilities? Is that like, so if you put money into Social Security, you don't get it, or is the new system going to pay off that?
They might start a third world war to forget all about that.
I think that's where we're headed.
Or the great taking theory with David Webb, who says we are the collateral, so they're going to take all of our stuff to pay for it. There's different scenarios, yeah.
Man, what a great conversation. Thank you so much for coming on the show, man. And I greatly appreciate you having on. I hope everybody swings over. All the links are down in the description. Swing over to your Substack, subscribe, support people. If you could skip a cup of coffee, you can sign up for a Substack subscription, and it helps people like this continue to find those amazing guests, man. So anytime you want to come back on, I would love to have you. And I just want to say thank you for coming on the show. This is a great conversation.
Thanks for having me on, and I should probably have you on geopolitics and empire at some point.
Man, I'd love to come on, man. God bless you. Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, folks, that's a wrap over here on the Ryan Matta Show. Thank you guys for sticking with us. Please make sure you guys swing over there and follow Geopolitics and Empire over on X. It's geopolitics_EMP. Please swing over there and support this gentleman's work. He's doing absolutely flawless work. I appreciate each and every one of you guys. Thank you guys for smashing that like button on your way out the door tonight. We look forward to seeing you same place, same time. We do a show 3 times a day. We go live at 10 a.m. And again, over on LFA TV, if you guys are into the more political landscape and you guys want to go down those rabbit holes and see how corrupt our government really is, swing over there and follow me on LFA TV. Those shows are exclusively over on Rumble. God bless you guys. We'll catch you guys in the next one. We out.
Run.